Well, we're here today. We're going to talk about procurement and pre-qualification.
You're going to market with a project. You want coverage on the bid, and to be competitive. And then you have some partners that you used before, some new partners you're introducing to the project, and all of a sudden they come up with a high mod, right? And then how do you work through that? It's a really critical part of what we do as companies, right?
It's interesting too to see the philosophy of EHS involvement in procurement and what methods and unique strategies that different companies focus on to procure their trade partners. Because I think if you ask different companies, they're a little different with what metrics they use, how they pre-qual, what information they want from their trade partners. Those are all important attributes, and that you should be looking at. And I think if you asked the group, we probably all do something a little different. So it's interesting to just see the differences in that in the qualification process.
Yeah, for sure. And it depends on the size of the company too. What resources you have. You say EHS involvement in procurement. I think it does depend on the size of the company and your access to really have a dedicated or even part-time resource. Looking at those things. For instance, at Shawmut, we have a risk management department that really does handle most of the pre-qual with our kind of pre-con teams. And they're looking at a lot of different data points for that. And so, Bob, you mentioned something like kind of quickly there, like a mod rate could change. And can you just explain that a little bit more for some people that might not even know what the mod rate is?
Yeah. So every company, we're speaking specifically about construction, has an experience modification factor. Generally, it's produced by NCCI, which is out of Florida, and it's associated specifically with your workers' comp experience. They look back over your 3 prior policy years, amount of payroll, what your loss history is, and then compare that against your peer group in an industry class basis, right? And if you're better than peer group, your mod rate will be less than 1. If you're not as good as the peer group, you're generally going to be higher than 1. And that's where the rub is, right? It's when you're paying that premium for policy, kind of reflects your ability to manage your risk relative to your workforce injuries experience.
I think the mod rate too helps with not only frequency but severity. I think it blends both those two factors in place too, which is important. So for the last 3 years, so if you're just interested in frequency, maybe the recordable incident rate's what you want to look at. But if you're interested in severity, cost of claim, and then frequency, the mod rate over the last 3 years is a good tool to use for sure.
And then particularly if you're running a CSP program or OSHA program, normally when you're looking at an OSHA 300 log to look at incidents that have been classified as a recordable, you don't necessarily see the severity from a financial impact.
That's right.
So by going through the mod worksheet, you're not only looking at days lost, but you're actually now looking at the financial severity. So we look at amount of payroll, amount of losses, and it's loss incurred per $100 in payroll, because that's how we evaluate our CSP performance. So I can go through the mod worksheet and look at it in that way too.
I've been somewhat quiet, but do you guys actually use EMR to judge the future performance capability of a subcontractor? As part of that pre-qualification, do you actually use it?
Yeah, I would say yes. That's a data point, but you're leading to a better question here. A bigger question is like maybe what else on top of that? I think that's pretty much industry standard, unless you got a loaded question here. But it feels like that's pretty much industry standard. That's common for people to get. I know our clients ask us what our EMR is. We got to provide them the brokerage letter, and so on whatever software we're using to collect the data, that's absolutely in there.
Okay. I didn't want to preface with the statement that I'm going to make. I didn't want to influence anybody by saying I don't give a shit about EMR. Nowhere near what I used to. Meaning I think that I've seen enough examples just in my small trade partner pool where certain trade partners have an elevated EMR and their performance is off the charts good. I can list out 2 subcontractors. I won't, but in particular, who are the highest performing subcontractors that we have, but they both have an elevated EMR. And part of it, in my experience, has been that they have a smaller labor pool for their trade than some other contractors. So that single or two injuries in a given policy year impacts their EMR in a much greater way than some of the larger contractors that we work with. So it's definitely a factor. We look at it. There's no question that we look at EMR as one of the factors. But I have to say, over time, I don't put as much weight on somebody's EMR. Meaning, if I see an elevated EMR, I'm going to investigate a little bit more. I'm going to ask the questions. But at the same time, a low EMR does not necessarily translate to the performance capability of a trade partner.
But it is, like you just said, it is an indicator of performance of some level. So you are going to investigate if it's above 1. You're going to say, well, why? Did you have a catastrophic event? And then what are you doing to prevent that from happening again? And how are you going to perform on our sites? What's the change of plan? You can't just accept an elevated EMR without any conversation. So it is an indicator that's going to give you a flag to say, I want to have more conversations around this.
It is. I was actually talking a little bit about the flip side.
Yeah.
I tend to look a little bit more closely at the lower EMRs for trade contractors and how it correlates. And this might sound a little corny, but how it correlates to our experience with that trade partner.
Well,
I find a lot more discrepancies between some of the lower EMRs and the performance that we've seen on our projects. They don't necessarily correlate. A 0.7 or a 0.72 for an EMR with a trade contractor doesn't mean that they're going to be a good partner when it comes to safety.
Mm-hmm.
We recently moved away from utilizing EMR as a metric to utilize for procurement, and we go with the recordable incident rate. That's what we use now.
Meaning it won't disqualify them?
It won't disqualify. It used to. We up until last year, we had an EMR policy where if you had a certain number, you wouldn't be considered for work. We did a study and we correlated who was getting hurt on our projects, and it wasn't the people with the high EMRs, believe it or not. So we're more interested in the event, the individual event, versus obviously severity, right, is important too. I'm not pulling away from that. You don't want the severe event happening on your project, but from using a lagging indicator, which EMR and RIR both are, how can you try to translate to future performance utilizing that number? So one of the things we do is using the RIR now. We gather the last 3 years OSHA logs. We look at it. We can see the list. We can try to gauge severity from the list. And then from that point, if they hit if their numbers, recordable incident rates are certain numbers, we've got green, red, yellow. If you're in those buckets, green, you can proceed. Yellow, you got to do this. Red, you got to do this. And we're calling our trade partners in, and we're having them develop specific plans that they're coming up with in conjunction with Turner to say, hey, how do you prevent your last 3 years of frequency? Like, 40% were cuts, lacerations to your fingertips to elbows. What are you going to do to prevent that from happening? And they come in and help cook the plan. So that's where we're moving towards, is trying to use that lagging indicator, to your point, to how do you utilize that for future endeavors, and how do you bring that number down in the future?
That's really interesting. So I take a deep dive on the high mod contractors. It's within my purview at work. But I'll go through the mod worksheet, looking at payroll, looking at states of work, looking at losses, number of losses. Is the policy a policy in OSIP or part of their general practice? I separate general practice from other policies that are in that worksheet, and then look at the recordables. I look at the recordables that we have and our own experience with the contractor. It's startling to see the number of claims reported on the mod worksheet and how that compares against the self-reported recorded claims on the OSHA log. And then when you look at the incidents that we've had internally with that contractor, it's startling. Now, I don't use it as a discriminator to say we're not working with you.
Yeah.
I use it more as a mentoring, coaching tool.
That's right.
I circle back to the sub and offer them insights based on my review.
Yeah.
And to hopefully build better and stronger relationships.
That's right.
Are we allowed to talk about the how we pre-qualify, meaning the types of services that we use, like the high wires or the IS net?
Sure, why not?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, because
I'm not prejudicing anybody.
No, you have a good, strong relationship with Highwire, for example, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think
can I ask, do you guys use an outside source for pre-qualification?
I'd like to break this segment for one moment and recognize our sponsor. High wire. No, I'm just kidding. No, we can talk about them all. I see no problem with that. Yeah. Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, I think I asked the question.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
It didn't sound like.
Who do you
it was a
guys
phrase
use?
in
I'll tell you
form of
who.
a
I'll
question.
tell you who we use. So we use Highwire and a company called Compass by Bespoke Metrics.
We do it in-house. We do it internally.
You do.
Yeah, our procurement group, our HS group, our operations leadership group. We've met with several outside companies and just opted to keep it in-house.
Do you use software for that, or you guys just have a list of items that you ask from your?
We have internal software that our IT department created where people go in and dump all their recordable rates in, dump their programs in, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But it's all generated pretty much in-house. I mean, our company has our IT department to help with that, so it's been pretty beneficial. But we have, to date, we have not used an outside vendor to help with that.
Okay, so you guys built your own program now. The trade partner will enter your program.
That's right.
Dump the information on there, and then there's some magic Turner algorithm behind the scenes.
Yeah, not that fancy, but yes.
Well, do you actually get a score for the subs?
We don't get no, it's not like a score, 82%,
Yeah,
83%.
right.
Like, I know other third party, if your program meets certain requirements, if your numbers fall in a certain range, there is an algorithm that'll pump out like a number score. We don't pump out a number score. We look at each component individually and engage in markets where, like in New England, in Boston, for us, we typically use the same contractors over and over again. I'm sure, like, probably most of us do.
Most of us,
right?
Yeah.
But if you go to a job like in Iowa maybe, or Louisiana, where we don't have that the type of work where it's sustainable, we're bringing new folks on. That's where I don't think we're probably as successful as probably using a third party, place to help us with that, because we just don't know the clientele. We're bringing them on. We're learning quickly. We're doing that. So that's where it may be a little bit more beneficial. But
That's probably where, Bob, you and I have an advantage over the national contractors, is we know the market that we're in. The players, for the most part, that we work with are the same players over and over. We'll call it the New England market, but we typically know the players that we're working with and have some historical data with that trade partner.
yeah.
Yeah, well, to your point, we don't have a program per se. It's all done internally. We don't third party it. That being stated, we do have a software program to manage our safety observations and incidents that has not changed in 18 years. Sure. So we have the benefit of that historic information that certainly tells its own story and supports an onboarding, for example, right? Or speaks about the crew leader that might be running crews better than other crew leaders, for example, right?
So we use a couple different pre-qualification systems, risk management, as I indicated earlier. They use TradeTap, and that's collecting a lot of financial data, as well as some safety stuff. I tend to like Highwire when it comes to safety, and that's for use for us and our trade partners when we want them to enroll. So we don't require everybody to. We issue a lot of contracts throughout the country every year. So it's a little bit difficult, and I understand that side of it, needing to go to multiple different vendors to upload all of your information, because I'm sure we can all probably relate to this. Different clients you have different vendors. So I have a little bit of an issue pushing that back down to the subcontractors, because I know what that pain is, whether it's an ISNet or a Highwire or Compass or an Avetta. There's a lot of different software that exists on the market. And it can be overwhelming for especially a smaller firm to have to continue to upload their information without even a guarantee of an award. Certainly the folks on the road, the jobs on the road where we don't have a strong presence and we're kind of bringing in either traveling subcontractors or kind of locals, we do want them to provide some more information so we can make an informed decision. And so kind of, if we can segue out of that, I do have a question. Like, you have your own program, you have yours, and you have yours, and we do ours. What types of information are you guys gathering at Turner? So you already mentioned a recordable incident rate. You're not really worried about the EMR anymore. What else are you gathering from the subs?
So we do recordable incident rate. We do we run our inspection predictive solutions history on them. So we have that internally that we use. We have Origami we use for all of our incident reporting. We can pull that data. Their EHS plan. We pull their EHS plan. We pull their OSHA. We ask for their OSHA activity log if there's been any recent OSHA, activity violations, inspections, that sort of thing. Those are the big ticket items that we look at. It's typically their data they're providing, and then we do a little bit of mining ourselves with some of the resources we have in-house through Origami or through Predictive Solutions or something like that to gauge some data and try to match it up. We do a little bit of our homework ourselves, so when we get the information from them, we can say, all right, how honest are they being? We have some data. They've done a lot of our work. 40% of their volume is Turner or whatever. Maybe that's a big number. Do the numbers kind of line up? So that's just strictly from an EHS standpoint. From a financial risk standpoint, there's obviously other things coming from just a standpoint of how much work they have and availability of staff and in trades folks, in volume they can take on. I mean, that's all looked at from a financial standpoint. But EHS is predominantly, that's what we look at.
So let's talk directly to maybe a smaller general contractor or somebody kind of just getting started, looking at some of this data from their trade partners. Maybe they're expanding operations, maybe they're going to a unique location, and they say, geez, I don't really know the market as well as I should, and I want to gather some information. So a couple big nuggets there, looking at the documented EH&S program from the subcontractor, looking at their OSHA experience. The challenge that I think a lot of us could have would be resources to verify, right? We can't just trust what they're uploading without any kind of proof. So I'm sure at Turner you guys have people that kind of do the research, say, okay, I have no OSHA experience. Well, you quick Google search says different.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. I think if you're starting off and you don't have the resource backing like the availability that we have, for me the most important thing, it's not the EHS manual. I mean, everyone has a pristine manual. When you put it in and you run your program through the automation and it looks for fall protection or ladders, or it's all going to be there. For me, it's really their safety management system. What's the leadership look like from the top, and then really it is using that lagging indicator to try to assess how they're hurting themselves over the last 3 years, and looking at their OSHA logs and trying to make a honest assessment of, like, as a safety professional, each log has X amount of data on it. Is it repetitive? And then bringing them in and having a conversation and saying, what are you doing? Like, do you have an annual plan predicated around this? Have you looked at updating your EHS policies or programs? How does leadership feel about this? Who's managing very easily what I picked out in a matter of minutes by looking at your log? How are you trying to better your company and performance from an EHS standpoint? I think that, to me, is a powerful piece of information that I can get a lot out of by just having a 1-hour meeting with that trade partner before we were to bring them on or not. And it's a heavy lift, but our operations manager helps with it. We've got other safety managers that help with those meetings, and we're really getting a lot out of it. You're not only are you meeting with them and coming up with a plan, but you're creating relationships now with leadership to those organizations and creating that partnering and how we're going to help coach each other. And it's a two-way street. And how can we help you? How can you help us? And we grow together on the project. And we check in now. And there's certain check-ins throughout the year, depending on if their RIR is high, and that's part of the plan. It's a little bit of a work, but I think if we use one thing, taking that RIR and then setting up the meeting with the principals to understand how they're looking at their own numbers and what management system they're going to put in place on this project to alleviate some of those things, to me, that's the most bang for my buck.
All right, so it sounds like we need to get a whiteboard here and start jotting down these ideas for listeners out there. But because you mentioned another thing there that you didn't in the opening about that, which is, again, pulling back in the OSHA logs, because that's their documented exposure or experience over time. So you've got your manual with you want to see some leadership commitment there, but that could also be tied into a site-specific plan. How are you going to specifically navigate the risks of these this unique job? Your OSHA experience based on your past history with or without Turner.
Yep.
What are you doing to do better on this upcoming project? And then if OSHA comes knocking, how did you perform? Did you get citations?
Yep.
What were they? What was your mitigation efforts around that? And Bob, it sounds like you have your own unique program too. So in addition to those items that Doug talked about, what else is Demio looking at?
So we're actually not just taking the mod number. We're requesting a complete worksheet so we can look at prior policy history in states. And that's important for us because we're a multi-state regional contractor. We may have a sub that we've used in New Hampshire or Mass, and now they want to work in Connecticut. So I'll look and see if they've had work in Connecticut, and that's reinforced through a policy issuance. And that informs us about their relationships they have in that market area to provide labor, for example. We also run across situations where we're ramping up for a summer slammer, and you look at the OSHA 300A log, and it says that they have 50 workers a year, and then the job needs 60 workers a year for the summer, right? So automatically they're committing resources that they normally don't manage. So it does create this unique opportunity to really understand more deeply the firm's level of sophistication, their ability to manage their work. And I think, to Doug's point, it creates an opportunity to really, for me, it really helps create an opportunity to mentor them, to get them through this work and to create stronger relationships.
All right, I just got to step in here, and we'll get to Jason, but I get really worried about the resource commitment. And Bob, those of us that know you well know that time doesn't exist for you. 24 hours is
sleep.
It's wild how much you can get done. But I think a lot of companies, myself included, would say that's difficult. That's difficult, especially you got a lot of large jobs going. You've got a lot of deadlines coming. You've got a large team that's relying on some direction, answers that questions that need answered, and yet you've got a summer barn burner coming up, like you described, and you're going to take the time to dig into that level of detail, which nobody here will question you doing, but to know that you've got 40, average 40 employees, but the job requires 50. I don't know many contractors that are looking to that level of detail. So there's probably a question in here somewhere. It's just, how would you handle that? Like, I can't go to that level of detail.
I sleep at night. Oh my God. So I don't know that I have the time to go into that level of detail. But I'll tell you that we're in two different markets right now that are fairly new to us in New England, one in Connecticut and one up in New Hampshire. So we're working with a trade partner base that is somewhat new to us. Some of the same players, but a lot of new players. And we have them go through the pre-qualification process. Sometimes, if I'm being honest, we don't make them go through the pre-qualification until we know that we're going to make the award to them, because there is a cost associated with the pre-qual. So we go through and we check the boxes with them. We look at their history and everything that gets uploaded to the pre-qual software, including safety and quality and financial and all that. But at the end of the day, it's a risk to us, meaning we're going to check the box, look at the pre-qualifications. We may not do the deep dive that Bob or Dimeo does, but there is a risk there. And it's honestly a risk that we're willing to accept. They may be green light across the board with all of their data in the pre-qual, but they're a new contractor to us. They don't know us and we don't know them and what their true capabilities are. It is one thing to look good on paper and then perform in the field. For the subs that we work with all the time, it's our internal data that gives us the best insight into their performance, meaning these are the tens of thousands of observations that we have on an SNF concrete, and we know they perform well. So we have a comfort level with them. With these new subs, we don't have that, and we're truly not going to be able to build that until we have some history with them. We're just not. You can look good on paper, but in reality, you may be the best or the toughest contractor to work with. It's a risk.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that's going to be a great segue for a future session here, talking about how do you onboard and communicate with new trade partners, like you said, in new markets. So good topic for the future.
It's a short topic, isn't it? The
I don't think
answer
so.
is you send them a contract, and then you both beat the crap out of each other for 6 months until one gives up.
That's one approach.
That's one way to do it. Yeah.
Anything else that we're missing on pre-qual?
Yeah, I'll tell you that we have had some success in taking a look past the typical pre-qual, meaning safety and financial, right? Those are the two biggest components with a pre-qualification. But the question that we asked a couple of years ago is that really the mark of a good subcontractor? Is that the entire picture of a good partner? And we came up with the answer, fucking no. There are a lot of ways to impact a a contract, and it's not just safety or financial capability or manpower. It's quality and schedule adherence, and there's a bunch of other factors. So we worked with one of the contractors that I mentioned previously to import the data that we have on that trade partner, real data out of Procore, some internal software packages that we use. Highwire is another one with our own observations and incidents and stuff like that. So we take that all in, and it generates, and you had mentioned this at the beginning, Doug, which seems to resonate with a lot of people. It produces a rating. And that rating is a green flag, no restrictions, up to this contract amount. Yellow means there is some restriction that we need to address, whether it's quality or schedule adherence or safety or anything. Yep. And then red is stop. You need approval to go past this. And that seems to be somewhat effective for us when we look at how well or not well a trade partner can perform. It's not just safety. I think we all agree safety is one piece of this puzzle, and it's not the be-all, end-all, and shouldn't be, quite frankly.
Agreed.
Yeah, because a lot of it is based on lagging indicators. So how do we pivot? How do we acquire leading indicators?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the quality, performance, schedule performance. While it appears to be lagging, it may be indeed leading indicating.
Right. You haven't had a loss, but there's a good chance that you could have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any advice for trade partners out there? Just suck it up and keep dumping your information into pre-qual and keep paying the fees.
Well, I think my observation, based on looking at OSHA 300 logs, for example, is need to get a better understanding of actually what the log is used for ultimately. Right? It's not just to hand to an inspector to comply with the law, but it's actually something that can be used to really more deeply understand, where your trouble spots are, and to use that as a way to improve your operations. I think that's probably the best information I can give to the sub-market.
Yeah, I would say don't have a bullshit safety plan.
Yeah.
Have a safety plan that actually you use, right? So to Doug's point around like leadership commitment, the creation of a true safety plan for the job. How are you going to safely perform work on this unique job? And don't fake it. Don't write it and keep it on a shelf like these. Use it, right? So if you say that you're going to have a trained workforce, have a trained workforce. That's
be legitimate.
Another conversation around who's trained out on the job sites, but everybody says we've got a trained workforce, but who's actually providing that training? Who's conducting those, those routine job site inspections, having these engaging conversations with their crews, or are they just accepting whatever the GC is telling them to do? Go to our weekly safety meeting, do your daily huddles, check this box, write your name here, do this, and then go back to work. That's the difference, not only from a sub's perspective, from a GC's perspective too. Whatever you're saying you're doing, just really do it. Yeah. Because we know the pre-qualification systems. We talked about a few, there's many more out there, and you can write a program that gets you a better score. You can't lie about your past performance, but your leading indicators that you say you do, you've got to do them. And it's easy to fake. That's why I'm saying it the way I am. It's easy to fake. It's easy to have it written down. But the people that make a difference are the ones that actually do what they say. There's plenty of them out there, but there could be more.
We're in technology is going to kind of play here for all four of our organizations in the industry, really, because there's things being generated out there right now that we're kind of loosely.
ChatGPT, write me a safety plan for construction.
Not a safety plan.
Done.
Not a safety plan, but analyzing data.
Mm-hmm.
So, like right now, we're piloting something where it'll pull up the companies, because we have their OSHA 300 logs. That's one of the things we ask for. Mm-hmm. So it'll go in and it'll data mine their OSHA 300 logs. It'll go into Origami, our RIMS systems, and pull all the RIMS information. It'll go in our predictive solutions, pull all the predictive solutions information, and it'll give me a 3-page summary on how they hurt themselves, how they're not working safe through predictive solutions, and what the recommendation should be to do that. Now, is that accurate 100%? Absolutely not. Will it be in the near future? Maybe, but it's a great starting point.
It's pretty good.
Where now you talk about companies without resources. If they can dial that in and they're taking whatever data points they want and it's generating a 3-page report for you to start, and then you just have to go in now and put the finishing touches on it, that provides a resource as well. So there's going to be some technologies that come up here that are going to help with procurement. They're going to help with analyzing all this data that we have that we don't have the resources to typically use right now. Because that's with a lot of things, like with our safety software. We do all these observations. Are we really utilizing that data to the best of their ability? That's a whole different conversation. But if you could use the data better, and at the touch of a button where you could say, run this report for me, and 10 minutes later it comes out, or 3 minutes later it comes out, and you didn't do anything, you're doing something else while you're doing it.
AI is going to revolutionize what we're doing.
doing it right now.
To your point, I did a quick analysis of a project and our self-inspections, and I dropped that spreadsheet into ChatGPT, and it analyzed it in 10 seconds and gave me some insights that were worthwhile.
It would have taken you 15 minutes to probably go through. Yeah.
Right. But to your point, it's something that we should all take notice of and really get more educated on. Prompt writing becomes really important, and then the ability to pull down through APIs and sort of harvest, and that data is going to be important.
Yeah.
Also a separate topic, but the million-dollar question is, so if we have that capability to analyze a sub, how do we use that to our advantage, really to the trade partner's advantage, to get them that information? We're horrible as an industry in doing that. Whatever you generate on your site or on your site, Sean, stays within that company, that GC, or within that project. I firmly believe we're doing a disservice by not sharing this aggregated information with our subs. Hey, if you want a roadmap to how to improve, or what we see as a GC, here it is. Yeah, we don't do it enough as an industry.
And that's where the resources come in, because to have a pointed touch or a monumental, I'll say, event, right? You can automate safety reports that go out to a trade partner every Friday, and it becomes noise after a while, right? We automate stuff out of analyzing predictive solutions. Every week they get a report. Do they look at it?
Delete.
Right? Don't even open it. Right, so it's
You get up at 3:40 in the morning every day to send reports out, and I always say yes. But
you might.
But there are questions.
But my point is we're doing that. We're thinking we're doing a service, to your point, of sharing that data, but it's not being effective. It's not being passed down to the end user, which is the workforce, the tradesmen and women out there. But I'm telling you, and it comes back to resource. But if you can get your ops team to start meeting with these folks, with the principals of the company, and having these points, we've met with our top 30 last year. We're going to the next 30, and we're revisiting them, and it's really reinvigorated me, because you're creating relationships you may have lost over the past years. You're meeting new people, and you're, to Bob's point, you're mentoring each other. You're working with each other. You're collaborating with each other. And when one of us starts to kind of go off the rails a little bit, it's so much easier to pick up the phone after having that initial principles kickoff and talk about how we can better each other for this job. And you hold yourselves accountable. It just takes the effort to do it, but to get anything out of it, you're gonna have to roll up your sleeves and put the energy and investment behind it. Create those relationships, because we can send data out blindly in an email, and we do it today, and it's just noise.
You're almost suggesting, at some level, that you allow the sub-market to have access to your generative AI system based on their own performance, right? Right? I mean, we have 18 years of history, of incident history, of observation history. If we're going to create that infrastructure so our operations team can gather insights about a subcontractor, doesn't it make sense to allow them to pull from that resource too? I'm just thinking based on what you just said.
Yeah.
Doug.
If you're a concrete contractor and you're doing a cast in place building, you may have different exposures to concrete on metal deck where it's just flat work. And it's like, all right, can I go in and look at a job where I had cast in place? I know it was cast in place. I can go look at what happened there. But yeah, I think technology is going to help the industry out greatly in the years to come, which is again probably a whole other conversation. But just we're starting to utilize it from a procurement standpoint to take those data points, create a start of a report, and it helps take off some things off of safety, procurement, the operations team, purchasing.
I think if we come back in 12 months, this conversation would be much more informed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thanks for joining us today, Doug.
Good chat.
I appreciate you having me.
Doug has to go.
Bye, Doug.
And
Great to see you, Doug.
I'll
break.
You guys won't be off my list.